last time. I still remember that. It was a great time. Thank you so much.
We have a live mic, so I'm not sorry.
My granddaughter was who gave you the money.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
Now I'm coming back.
Good.
Good to see you.
I remarked how big you were. That's right. Hey, good morning. Thank you for coming out to our first Veterans Breakfast Club event here in Bethel Park in 2023. It is wonderful to have you. I know we have several people here who are at a Veterans Breakfast Club event for the first time, so I will introduce myself. My name is Todd DiPastino. I'm the Executive Director of the Veterans Breakfast Club, founder, and as you can see from our logo, we've been doing these kind of events for 15 years. We started right on Fort Couch Road at the Crown Plaza at one of their ballrooms with 30 World War II veterans in the fall of 2008, and we've continued to expand and have these kind of programs ever since. You never know what you're going to hear. I'm not a veteran. I teach and write history, and so I get to ask veterans all kinds of stupid questions that they would never, ever ask each other. But it's educational for those of us who haven't served to hear, and it's inspirational to hear these stories. And I think veterans get a lot out of it because when you go through life and you get to be an advanced age, am I right, Ed?
Yeah.
Yes. You accumulate a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge and a lot of wisdom. And there's almost something, I believe, like biological about wanting to share what you've learned over the course of interesting experiences. And no matter where you served or how you served, you know, when you raised that right hand, when you went through that basic training, you were indoctrinated into a special subculture, very different from the regular civilian world. And you learned a thing or two, especially you Marines, Ray. You get indoctrinated in boot camp. Yes, sometimes they have to pound it into you. Sometimes you learn it easily. But man, it's fascinating for me as an outsider to the veterans community, to the military community, to hear these stories and to learn from them. We always like to begin with the national anthem, and we have Harry Van Riper. There he is in 1968 up on the screen. Here he is today. He is going to be leading us in the national anthem, and I'm going to ask you a few questions, Harry. Okay? All right.
All right, Harry. Thank Harry. I want you to go over there. Stand back over there so they come on the stage so they can see you.
That's all right. We ready? Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Oh, right, Harry, thank you. You may be seated. Except for you, Harry. You stand.
Yeah, you stay, Harry.
Thank you once again. And I do want to thank UPMC for sponsoring this event. They're going to be speaking. And, of course, Rocky Bleier. I kid myself they're all here for me. Nah. I know it's Rocky Bleier, and I'm very grateful to have him take out a huge part of his day to come and join us here. Harry, you are our poster child for our VBC magazine this spring. There you are on the cover. You're the cover boy. There you are receiving a Purple Heart. You lost your left arm on August 19th, 1968?
Yes, yes.
And where are you when you're getting the Purple Heart there?
Well, that actually was in a hallway. If you look at your table of contents, it's an ugly door and all. He made that match where I was at the time I was hit, actually.
Yeah, and I would love to take credit for that too, but actually my daughter came up with that idea. Let's put Harry in the background be where he got hit. So that's it. That's where you got hit.
Yes.
Right. And you said to me, the reason I really wanted to do an article with you for our BBC magazine, and by the way, this comes out every quarter. We send it out to over 8,000 households, and then we print up another 7,500 and hand distribute them. So I brought 700 copies today. Yeah, emptied out a little bit of my garage. So feel free to take 25, 50, 100 with you. If you have somewhere to hand them out, that's wonderful. That's the main marketing we do, and this is how people find out about the Veterans Breakfast Club. You said to me years ago, Harry, losing my arm was the best thing that ever happened to me. And that was the kind of quotation that stuck with me, and I would think about from time to time. And I wanted to explore that more with you, because most people would say having a grievous wound like you received would be the worst thing that ever happened to them, but that's not the case for you.
It was a challenge. I was in graduate school, molecular genetics lab. The teacher said 2 hours behind or more, most likely. It's a really, really rough one. I was 15 minutes behind. The next closest person was 2.5 hours behind. What this has done for me is it made me think everything through very, very thoroughly. How am I going to do it with one hand? So I had to think that through, and it then transferred to everything in my life when I do things, not necessarily a molecular genetics lab, but when I go through something that I have to get through, I think through very thoroughly before I do it.
And you, and I've talked to your family members, you've never felt sorry for yourself, and you've never considered yourself disabled.
No, not really. I pulled car engines by myself with one hand. I was a mechanic. I used to build race cars way back. But yeah, I haven't found something that I haven't been able to figure out a way to do it.
You figure it out. You figure out how to do it.
Yeah, and that's what makes everything I do to the best of my ability, because I think them through so thoroughly. Yeah, it's a given.
Well, thank you, Harry. Thank you for coming this morning, sharing your story, and sharing your story for the magazine.
Thank you for the story. You did a wonderful job, and I'm blushing.
Thank you very much. Hey, we have these events also online every Monday night at 7 p.m. We call it VBC Happy Hour. We have people join us from all over the country, all over the world to share stories. We're able to get really fascinating people from all over. Last night, Sean Hall, our host of VBC Happy Hour last night, had a wonderful guest, and I was with him, who just wrote a book on the 12 soldiers who guarded Saddam Hussein in the months before he was executed. Boy, was that a fascinating program, a fascinating conversation. We had 9 women on who received Purple Hearts. Of the 2 million Purple Hearts that have been awarded since World War II, 500, only 500 out of those 2 million have been women, and we had 9 of them on to share their stories. They were wounded in Iraq and Afghanistan. Women simply haven't been exposed to combat until very recently, and so the number of women who've been wounded is lower than normal. Ron Worstall. Ron, you're here. Ron appeared with us. Where is Ron? Hey, Ron. There's Ron. Very graciously joined us several weeks ago for the screening of a documentary that he's in about Agent Orange in America and Vietnam. We had a fascinating conversation about Agent Orange and what it was and what it did and what it's still doing today. And, we're able to have these kind of broad conversations with veterans from all over join us. And then very recently, one of our most popular programs was a 99-year-old man who lives in Maine. And he emailed me and said, I remember I joined the Navy before Pearl Harbor, and I remember pretty much every day of my service. And man, did he ever. He served on 11 different ships. And we did a 90-minute program with him, and we're going to schedule a part 2 because I think we just got through 5 of his ships, 5 of the 11. So he was and he joined us last night just to say hello also. So these are the kinds of programs that we have. Thursday night, this Thursday at 7 p.m., we're screening another documentary called Scramble the Sea Wolves. Some of you Vietnam veterans, especially if you were in the Mekong, may remember Navy helicopter operations in the Mekong Delta. That was an experimental thing in 1966. We're going to have the filmmakers, we're going to screen the film, have the filmmakers on, then for a conversation after the screening at 7 p.m. on Thursday night, and then have those Navy helicopter pilots who served in Vietnam and were a member of the Sea Wolves. We're going to have them share their stories. So this is going to be a big event that we have Thursday night. Again, you can connect to these events through our website, veteransbreakfastclub.org. I do want to recognize some of our older World War II veterans. We have, by my count, 3 World War II veterans with us today, and at least 3 Korean War veterans. Warren Goss, you are one of our, could you stand up, Warren, please? I'll try, he says, I'll try. I thought of you, Warren, when I saw this picture. I watched a movie recently, a bad movie, I don't recommend it, called Objective Burma. Errol Flynn, that's right, Ray McNowski knows it. It's a terrible movie, holy mackerel. Errol Flynn, Objective Burma, it's from the war era, and in that movie, at least 10 times, a soldier takes a grenade, pulls the pin out with his teeth, and then throws it. Did you ever do that, Warren?
Never did that in my life. Never did that. If he had any damn sense, he wouldn't do it either.
Sean Hall, if you want to run this film here, this is a clip from Objective Burma where you could see. And the other thing that he does, if you run the clip, Sean, a guy has a grenade, pulls the pin out with his teeth, and then he says something funny before he throws it at the Japanese. He says, "Mazel tov," and throws it. Did you ever, crack a joke like that when you were in college?
I didn't crack a joke. I didn't want nobody to know I was there.
Here he is. That's it. He pulls it with his teeth. Mazel tov. Yeah, what a terrible movie.
Hollywood can mix a lot of things up.
Did you, as a kid, you probably saw movies and maybe war movies. Did those movies, was war what you expected it to be, or was it different than you expected as a young man?
I never thought of war until I got to be 16. And then I went to the Pennsylvania Auxiliary when they bombed Pearl Harbor. I joined that, and there's where I learned the infantry. Wow. All of that is before. I was 16 then. I was in there maybe a year and a half or so, I forget.
And people should know this is Warren here. He landed on Utah Beach on D-Day, June 6, 1944, and fought all the way through Germany. And one of the most delightful experiences I ever had was running across this little piece of archival film of Warren on Utah Beach. This is Warren in the foreground. That's him. A Signal Corps filmmaker was there.
And there, I don't think I even had the pin out of that.
Yeah, that's right. You have a grenade in your left hand and a rifle in your right hand. What do you remember of landing on Utah Beach?
Hiding mostly, I guess. Shivering like a dog crapping razor blades. It was no picnic.
That's a new one.
First time I heard that was.
It was not a picnic. I'll tell you, though, it was the biggest beach party I was ever at.
Hey, I asked for it, yeah. Warren.
We couldn't hear it.
Oh, you didn't hear what? Could you repeat that colorful? You were shivering like a what?
You tell them.
He said, I was shivering like a dog crapping razor blades. Yeah. Well, we'll end it here. Thank you, Warren. Thank you very much. Hey, and I do want to also recognize we have Bob Stevens with us. Bob is a Navy vet, World War II. Thank you, Bob. Bob, how old are you?
99.
You're 99 years old. I will just ask you, did you like the Navy?
Oh, yes, I like the Navy.
What did you like about it?
I don't know. I guess the discipline, I suppose. I don't know. I was a young kid in those days. I don't know.
Yeah, you were a young kid. Did you come home changed? I mean, I would imagine the experience of war in the Pacific changed you.
No, it probably did, but I wasn't aware of the change at the time.
Yeah, right.
Sure.
Well, thanks for coming today, Bob. And then finally, we have Isla Cole, who is a Navy Wave veteran, World War II. Thank you, Beth, for bringing Isla. Hello, Isla.
Hi, Todd.
Thank you for coming today.
You picked me right when I had my mouth full.
How old are you, Isla?
98.
98. Did you like the Navy?
Very much.
What did you like about it? And don't say the sailors.
That was one of them. But I had such good duty. I never had anything to complain about. And I worked in San Francisco for about a year, and there were about 8 of us, I guess, that we were going to get out at the end of our volunteering. And we decided to stay in. And then we could not get our same jobs back. So they suggested we go into, let's see, it was with MATS, Naval Air Transport Service.
Right, right.
And we changed the rate, and I became like a stewardess.
Yes. Yeah, so you flew from San Francisco to like Honolulu, right, regularly. Mm-hmm. That sounds like good duty.
It was. And then our plane was in a rotation, and if it was being worked on for some reason, they took us out, and we had to wait for the next time it became available. So we would spend time on the beach, and and it was just a good time.
Yeah, I could imagine.
And I was in the Navy, but I never really learned to swim.
Isla, thank you so much for joining us today. Beth, thank you so much for bringing Isla. How terrific. We also have a number of Korean War veterans here. I know we have Bob Harbula. Bob, where are you? I just want to let people know. There you are. Bob Harbula was in the U.S. Marine Corps and served in the Battle of Chosin Reservoir, also the Battle of Seoul. Frozen Chosin. Yes, the Frozen Chosin. Bob is in a number of books. If you read about the Battle of the Chosin Reservoir, you will see Bob's name. If you watch the wonderful 2-hour documentary, PBS documentary on the Frozen Chosin, you are in that documentary. I hear you're in also a recent book, correct?
Right. It was called The Flying Grunt. And you Vietnam veterans will appreciate this. He was my lieutenant in Korea, a line lieutenant. And after he left Korea, he went to school in Hawaii to become a pilot. And I knew nothing about this, for maybe 50 years. And I met him at a reunion we had. And his name is Lieutenant General Richard Carey. And who he was in command of the helicopter squadron that evacuated Saigon. Oh, wow. So this was my connection, or his connection. This guy's amazing. What he did, it tells about his life, how tough he had it. His wife had Alzheimer's for 15 years, and he took care of her. Plus, he raised a lot of money for memorials for the Koreans, Chosin Reservoir in Texas and in Washington, D.C., or down at Quantico at the Marine Museum. And his story is quite interesting, and I think you'd appreciate it. It's called The Flying Grunt, and it just came out recently.
Well, your story is quite extraordinary, and you're pretty amazing. And I want to schedule you again to come on to our Zoom program and talk about your Korean War experience. Scott, if you wouldn't mind helping your dad maybe with that, getting that together, we'd love, because it is, after all, this July 27th will be the 70th anniversary of the ceasefire in Korea, the armistice on July 27th. So I would love to mark that occasion with several programs with Korean War veterans. Sure. Thank you very much, Bob. Thank you for coming. We have Dave Ciccone, too. Dave Ciccone is a Korean War vet, although you look like you're like my older brother, my kid brother. Yeah, my kid brother. Dave is 90 years old. How? Look at him. Look at him. You look way older than him, Jay. What's your secret to youth?
I drink.
Good. Good. Good.
Wine's very good for you.
Wine is very good for you. Yes, it is. Yes, right. I'm fascinated by your story because you served in Korea in 1951 in the Air Force. You were a member of a B-29 crew. They were using B-29s in the Korean War. What was your job on the B-29?
Radio operator, ECM operator, and gunner. Had 3 jobs.
So ECM, electronic countermeasures. Radio operator.
That's when these aircraft, the flak's coming up and everything else, you had to block them out. You had these signals, you blocked them out, searchlights, things like that. But somebody asked me once, he said, how'd you do? I said, well, after 32 missions, I'm still here, so I must have did a good job, you know.
That's right.
Yeah, heck yeah.
And I'm famous for my stupid questions. I asked you a really stupid one here before breakfast. You told me that you flew in these B-29 missions over North Korea. And I said, did you get shot at? And you looked at me like, how stupid are you? So you did get shot at?
Yes. Wasn't very good. It's not nice to get shot at.
It's not nice to get shot at.
Right, guys? You all agree?
But the B-29 was sturdy enough to withstand?
Very good airplane. Can I tell one story about Korea?
Yeah, tell one story.
Well, Lieutenant Gliffa, who went to West Point, he was an All-American football player. One day he came out with him, he threw a hand grenade 100 yards. I says, I hope he threw it downhill, because I don't think you could throw a hand grenade 100 yards. Well, he was a football player. Figure that out. So, of course, he didn't pull it with his teeth either, I don't think. But, hey, it was a good 4 years. I enjoyed it. You enjoyed it. That's all I got.
Could you come on Zoom sometime? Maybe get Stan to have you come on, share your story.
He's too young to come out with me.
Yeah, all right. All right. Thanks, David. Take care. And then finally, before we get to UPMC and Rocky Bleier, Tom Smith. I do want to recognize Tom. Tom, Korean War. Back there. Tom Smith is another one. Tom, I thought of you and quoted you often last month for Vietnam Veterans Day. It was, would you mind standing up, please, Tom? It was Vietnam Veterans Day on March 29th. and we had a nice big program for Vietnam veterans at the Heinz History Center, and I quoted you. You came home from Korea, and you have said, kind of like when you came home from Korea, nobody really wanted to talk to you about it. Nobody, there were no parades, no celebrations, no thank you for your service. Kind of forgotten?
Yeah, when we hit Frisco, we had one lady and a two-man band to welcome us. And that was it.
I think you tried to join maybe the VFW or the American Legion and didn't.
Yeah, the local VFW gave me a free membership while I was in Korea. And then I can't remember when it was, somewhere in the late 50s or something, I got a letter telling me I could no longer belong to the VFW because I wasn't in a war. And I meant to look it up because I know there's a certain bylaw that they had to pass, a special bylaw to get us to join.
Yeah.
And like two World War II veterans told me when I was in Germany, said I was in a pop gun war.
You were in a pop gun war. Right. You said to me, this is a couple years ago, right here in this room, we were talking just like this, and you said, I never would be at an event like this if it weren't for the Vietnam veterans. The Vietnam veterans were the ones that kind of welcomed you back into the fold of the veterans community.
They set the tone for veterans to be recognized.
Yeah.
It's in my belief.
Yeah, I
yes.
agree.
I owe a lot to them.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tom. Thank you so much. We have UPMC for Life with us here, and we're very grateful for you guys to make this event possible. Thank you, Joan and Ashley. And we have Chris Preffer and Mike up here. Here we go. Hey, Chris. Is Chris there? Where's Chris? Oh, the other end. There's Chris. I'm going to show a picture of Chris. Would you mind advancing the slide? There he is. Chris is 21 years in the Air Force. You served both in the enlisted side and officer side. Yeah, that deserves a round of applause. Chris, you are due to retire this year?
Yeah, that's right. Sunday's my last.
Can you use use that.
Yeah, so Sunday will be my last active day of serving, and then I'll retire later on this summer.
Sunday?
Yeah. Yep.
Will you
It's
miss
exciting.
it?
There's aspects of it that I enjoyed. I'm glad I did it, but there's a lot of things that I'm glad that it's over and just don't have to do it again.
Well, yeah, and you have a young family, and you've had many deployments to Afghanistan.
To Afghanistan, I went to Kuwait and to Turkey and to Guam. I like to say that the deployments progressively got worse. It started with Guam, then to Turkey, then to Kuwait, then 2 times to Afghanistan. So
right.
I will not miss those.
And you're at the 171st Air Refueling Wing. We have Deb Krall here. Deb.
We do.
Yeah.
I served with Deb for a long time, and Mike, who's in the back, working the camera as well. Mike's a 30-plus year veteran also at the 171st and with the Air Force.
And what was your job? I know you've had probably many different kinds of jobs in the Air Force, but what is the job that you're leaving?
Yeah, so the job that I'm leaving now is really with like HR for the Air Force, but the one in that photo, I was a logistics officer, and that was in Afghanistan. I think that was in Bagram when that was taken. So I was there in 2013, and my job was to help move all the equipment and people out that we had built up over the decade or so that we were there. And what was happening is that the Army and Marines were moving everything, but via convoy over the road. So there's only really 2 roads out of Afghanistan through Pakistan, and Taliban and others knew what those were. And so there was a lot of death. There was a lot of injuries and wounded coming back. So my job was to develop the operation to move everything by air that truly needed to leave the country. So that's what I was doing there, was moving to another forward operating base that day to lay out another logistics plan.
Chris, you're several generations younger than Warren Goss here, who just talked about being in combat, being in war. Was war what you expected it to be, and how did you deal with any fear or danger?
Yeah, so I'll say that my time, especially in Afghanistan, was the most alive almost that you ever feel, because you focus on that day and whatever's happening in that moment. It's not so much the what's going to happen, 2 months from now or 3 months from now. I always had that countdown timer of when am I leaving, but the focus was always just that day. What's happening today?
How interesting. You're also here, you're really the one more than anybody else responsible for this event today, responsible for bringing Rocky Bleier here. You're with UPMC for life. Thank you very much, Chris.
Absolutely. Thank you, Todd. So, Todd, thanks for the introduction. To Christ Church, thank you for living out your mission of building an inclusive community, sharing Christ, transforming love, giving this space to us. To the Roundtable Ministry, thank you this morning for the breakfast. Todd, thank you for putting these together to create a community, to be able to share these stories so that the memories can live on of what you all have done. So like Todd mentioned, I am here with UPMC. I actually work for the Medicare line of business, UPMC for Life, where Mike and I actually got to create a Medicare Advantage product specifically for veterans. My dad was a 35-year Air Force veteran, retired, has Medicare and TRICARE for Life. How many in the room have TRICARE for Life or retired? That's wonderful. So I created a product specific for my parents, my mom and dad, who are 74 and 77, they had original Medicare forever, and with original Medicare and TRICARE for Life, it was the best thing going until we created a product called PPO Salute. Stop back and see us. It'll help put money back in your pocket, give you great coverage, and cover things like dental, vision, and hearing with a $0 premium. It also adds $60 back into your Social Security check. So stop back and see us. See us for a challenge coin and a t-shirt as well if you didn't get that. But it's really my honor today that I get to introduce somebody that's a true American hero, somebody that I really admired growing up, somebody that I thought that was just larger than life and was always cool to see whenever he would come around. I know he's an extremely humble person as well. You all know exactly who I'm talking about. The Vietnam veteran who has a Purple Heart, who was awarded the Bronze Star, who was drafted to the Steelers, played during our amazing years in the 70s and 80s, brought 4 Super Bowl championships back to Pittsburgh. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to introduce Rocky Bleier.
Thank you. Thank you. Chris, thank you. Thank you, please. Obviously, it's a great pleasure to be able to be here and share this morning with all those you veterans that are out here. And I want to thank Chris and be associated with UPMC and Medicare, and because it's a wonderful product, and so I'm happy to be associated. Also, Todd has been thanked and thanked and thanked, but I want to take that opportunity to have an opportunity to be able to tell stories. And every one of us has a story of one nature or another. And one of the things I've come to kind of learn or experience over these past years, especially from Vietnam veteran era, is that I would get feedback from kids, family, grandkids that said, yeah, Dad served, or Grandpa served, but I never heard a story. He doesn't talk about that experience. And I always think that's somewhat of a shame, only because of the fact that that's how a generation learns from another generation about the stories that we have and the experiences. And it doesn't necessarily always have to be combat. It's the fact that you served. Because there is a percentage of us, no matter what, in that era that we had served other places around the world. But we did a job, and we did a duty, and we had a responsibility, and we learned lessons along the way. And really, it's those lessons, those experiences that we had, good times, bad times, because no matter where we ended up, we all went through basic training of one nature or another. Advanced infantry training, getting an MOS, going someplace else, the travel, the experiences, whatever it is, wherever we landed, are stories that need to be told. And so I'd like to share you somewhat of my story for those who have not read the book or saw the movie or see anything on ESPN and so on, or those who aren't a Steeler fan, so I will talk about that. But I was thinking, speaking of Steeler fans, and I'm assuming just that we're all Steeler fans, that are here. I mean, thank you very much. Thank you very much. For those who aren't, they're afraid to stand up and to admit that they're not. But I want to talk just very briefly about this year's draft. Because everybody asks, well, what did you think about the draft? What do you think about the Steelers coming up? What do you think about the potential? And I thought it was a wonderful draft. I thought we helped ourselves. I think we got some key players in positions that we all thought are needed: offensive line, defensive line, to be able to go hand in hand with the signings that we had as a free agent. So that is pretty much the same. And so we were glued to the television to see how the Steelers did in the draft and so on. And I'm not going to break it down, but overall, it was pretty cool. How many watched the draft on television? Yeah, guys coming up. It's amazing, right? It's amazing that the first round, it just took place, and we didn't even finish the first round on Thursday, and then it'd go over until Friday, and then we had to wait and so on. And then all the guys that had showed up and walking out on the stage, and all the, how can I say this, hoopla that had taken place. And I put it in perspective as far as change is concerned, because that was not the experience I had when I got drafted by the Pittsburgh Steelers 55 years ago. So my experience was somewhat different. I was in South Bend, Indiana, my senior year. And so the draft would come on, as it is now. And this was Sunday, so it took place Friday, Saturday, Sunday. There were 17 rounds that were selected during that period of time. There was no free agency as much as they signed at that time. And so it was a Sunday afternoon. So Friday, I wasn't expecting to be selected in the early rounds, and Saturday came by, and now it was Sunday. And so it was Sunday evening. And we had gone out to dinner, my roommate, another player, with a family that became friends. And so we went to their country club, dressed up in shirt and tie, had a nice meal. We were talking, came back to their house, had a little libation thereafter, and we were talking about, spring break, what are we going to do, where we're going to go, about the last semester in school, and, maybe what our futures would hold, when all of a sudden, the news came on. Sports. In the draft today, 3 players from the South Bend area were selected in the National Football League. So-and-so from Purdue went here. So-and-so from Indiana, University of Indiana, went there. And Notre Dame's captain, Bob Rocky Bleier, was drafted number 16th by the Pittsburgh Steelers. There was a pause in our conversation. Hey, congratulations. Anyway, what are we going to do for the rest of the summer and so on? So that was my indication. And what I wanted to talk about was transitions and how transitions affect all of us, because we all go through transitions in life, from high school to college, from high school to the military, a transition. From college into military, a transition, or into the workforce. As all those transitions that had taken place, within our lives, and they were impactful on ours. And I talk about that in the cases because how do we handle those transitions? Transitions into aging, transitions into finally, you go, you're 21, that's a transition. Then all of a sudden you're 30, that's a transition. Then 50, holy shit, that's a transition, And then 65, oh my God, or 62, what am I going to do? That's a big transition, and I got to get health care, and you got to get Medicare, but we go through those transitions. So one of the things that I've come to learn is that the only constant thing in life is change. Change is accelerating. And I've also come to realize that it accelerates in direct proportion to one's age. The older we become, God, the more things change. But as much as things change, some things don't change. Aging and memory. Three things happen as we grow older. The first one is that our memory goes. And I don't remember the other two. But why does that happen? I mean, why? Why all of a sudden do we forget to bring the cigars that we're going to bring for me, or the picture that you're going to bring for me, or the book today that you're going to have me sign, and we forget about that? Why? Well, for me, to put that in perspective, I came across a book called River Horse. And in the book, the author, William Least Heat Moon, wrote that our physical components change every 7 years, so that our brains continuously pass memories off onto a complete stranger. Now, if memory were total and complete, perhaps we'd be one person from start to finish, but forgetfulness cuts us off from who we've been, so that hourly we're reborn. Now, I tell you that, like a lot of us, I am now in my 8th decade of creating memories. And although I may not be the same person I was when I was walking in the rice paddies of Vietnam, or the last time I wore a uniform in the National Football League, but the highlights of my life, much like the highlights of each and every one of our lives, are forever etched in my minds. It's usually not that I have forgotten who I am or what took place in my life, but it's usually the good people that I have an opportunity to speak to that has forgotten who I am. And how I single-handedly won those 4 Super Bowls for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I just didn't want to let you forget about that. But we talk about, we talk about transitions. And I, come to the Steelers in 1968, as I had said. And the interesting thing is that in that draft class, there were 4 guys that made the team, 2 guys that made the taxi squad. The 4 that made the team were rounds 1, 2, 3, and 16. And you wonder why that happens. Well, I think the fact is that what we bring with us, things that we've learned, determination, dedication, hard work, apply to no matter what we may do, to be able to make that transition within our lives. And I got a chance that year to play 10 of 14 games. And I was getting ready for the 11th game, and I have to tell you this because some of you had this experience. I was sitting in front of my locker at Old Pitt Stadium, and the locker room there was cramped and pungent and laid out like every locker room before or since. Lockers against the wall, players around the perimeter. In the middle was a laundry basket with a couple tables, and one of the tables had all the fan mail for the players deposited upon it. It was a place I'd never visited from that first day of training camp up through the 10th game of the season, not when you're the 417th person picked in the draft, playing on a losing team. I mean, nobody knows you exist. My mother, God rest her soul, never even sent me a letter. When all of a sudden one of the equipment guys holler, "Hey, Bleier, there's a letter over here for you." Well, I stood up, maybe a little too quickly. Ever do that? Got a little lightheaded, looked around, see if anybody noticed, sauntered over the table, thinking to myself, now who's writing me a letter? Maybe it's a Notre Dame fan that wants an autograph from a former captain. And I perused through the mail, and my God, there it was. My first piece of fan mail. And I have to tell you, I picked it up very tenderly, opened it up, slipped out the paper inside, unfolded it. And it said this: "Greetings. We'd like to inform you that you've been inducted into the armed services of your country." Now, I have to tell you in all honesty, that was the worst fan letter I've ever received. Like everybody else who got their draft notification back in 1968, there was no lottery back then. I was not necessarily embracing my soon-to-be current change in life, and I quickly calculated my options. Why? Because we had options back then. We could leave the country. Some people were doing that. Yeah, but not me. Okay. You could not show up. Consequence: go to jail. That's even worse. You could apply as a conscientious objector to that conflict. But coming from Appleton, Wisconsin, what was I going to object about? You could enlist, but that was a 4-year commitment. Being drafted was only 2 years at that time. Or you could join the reserve or the National Guard, but this was 1968, the height of the war. All those spots were filled. I was quickly running out of options. Now, we had a game against Cleveland before I had to report, and I thought to myself, hey, you might have another option. What if you got hurt in that game? Let's be honest, you might not have to report. So in that game against Cleveland, I threw my body into every Browns jersey I could find. Stupid Browns, they couldn't even hurt me when I wanted them to. But like all of us, when I knew I was going to go, there was a certain relief because we wanted to live up to our responsibility. I mean, what would I tell my kids if they ever said, hey, Dad, what did you do during the war? What if I truly disappointed Mom or Dad? I remember the first letter I wrote home. It said this: Dear Mom, Dad, Vietnam's really not as bad as I thought it would be. We're on the ocean side. Sometimes we're allowed in it. Temperature's about 80 degrees. The heat's about 100 degrees. Really makes a difference. And I thought, you know how many kids like me wrote that same kind of letter home the first day they were in country? Yeah, it's a tropical paradise. And I wrote home often. I'm going to tell you just the way it is, I'd write. So if you want something to worry about, I will give you something to worry about. Then I wrote, ha, ha, ha. I mean, that was my policy. I mean, think about it, guys. There was no text, tweets, posts back then. Hell, we could be dead by the time they got our letter. So I wrote to them about the elephant grass. It was tall and sharp, and about the leeches that were short and sharp, and about the wait-a-minute vines where you'd be out on patrol with your unit, the 100-plus degree temperature so hot it'd make your nose bleed, the temperature that would deconstruct this body from over 200 pounds to 165 pounds, and come across these vines that had thorns on them like little fish hooks, and all of a sudden you get caught, and the more you try to get yourself untangled, well, just the more you got yourself tangled, and the only thing you could holler was, wait a minute, until you got yourself untangled. Wrote to them about the Viet Cong, who were farmers by day and killers by night, by my luxurious air mattress and the poncho liner I used as a cover. How the mud turned into rivers when it rained, and the only time you got a chance to bathe was, well, when it did rain. How we're in the same clothes 2-3 weeks at a time. I don't think I wrote to them about the occasional Bengal tiger or the snakes. I didn't really want them to worry. You know, I thought I could handle combat, and I don't know how many of you had that same kind of a thing. I thought I could handle combat, and you know why? Because I had the nuns growing up. What was combat like? Well, it was like 16 years of Catholic education. I mean, it was like that. You see, I thought if I could be flip about it, I didn't have to think about it. I didn't have to think about how ridiculously unfunny it really was. And so when the bullet entered my thigh and I was laying on the ground and blood was pouring in my pants, I did think about the nuns, one in particular, my 6th grade teacher. And all the stories that she told us about those soldiers in Korea in World War II, that when the blood started to flow, they started making deals. That's how some of them became priests. And I thought to myself, that's where I'm starting my bidding, okay? You get me out of here, and I'll become a... Well, I wasn't going to become a priest. Okay, fine. What else do you got? In 4 days, I was going to go to leadership school where I had the chance to test out of combat in 4 days, but this was not August 24th. This was August 20th, and bleeding was the best you could hope for because guys were dying, not making deals, dying. So, with a bullet in my thigh and panic in my chest, I still have my weapon, a grenade launcher. M79, and I was launching grenades not knowing where they were landing. We were getting hammered. I put my head down for a moment, maybe reconsidering the priesthood. When all of a sudden I saw a grenade come flying through the air and hit my commanding officer in the middle of the back, bounced off, rolled between my feet, and it blew up between both of my feet, my legs, and again we were in another firefight. Till a platoon fought its way down and dragged us out of there to a secured area. I was 8th in line, and we were just dragged through the night on a poncho liner, 165, 170 pounds of dead meat. And they'd been in battle all day as well. It got to a point where they just couldn't carry me any further. And the interesting thing is this, and the point that I want to make is that no man is an island. We didn't get to where we are today by ourselves, if you think about it. We got here because of someone, something. We got here because of an opportunity. We got here because of a mentor, a teacher. We got here because of a drill sergeant. We got here because of a parent. We got here because somebody kicked us in the rear end, showed us a way, pushed us through the door. We got here because somebody cared along the way. And if you think about that impact in our lives, there's always somebody that has given us some guidance, taught us a lesson, showed us a way. So all of a sudden, my group puts me down and said, don't worry, we'll send a stretcher back for you. When out of the darkness, unbeknownst to me, all of a sudden 2 black hands reach down, scoop me up, throws me over his shoulder, and starts carrying me to the helicopter. Now, the helicopter was a long ways away, and this black man would put me down, my blood all over him, catch his breath, pick me up again, and continue on until he got me onto that helicopter. And I never saw him again. I didn't know his name, didn't know where he lived, I didn't know who he was. But I can tell you this, I'm here today because of a colorblind soldier back in 1969 who saw not that he was black and I was white, but that blood was blood was blood. And he did more for me on that day than if he was my own brother. In some sense, as we all share, we did become brothers in the brotherhood of war. So I got to a aid station before I went to Danang, before I went to Tokyo, before I came back to the States. But it was right in that aid station, right out of the field, IV, morphine, drip. and all those questions that we have of time of need, and it doesn't have to be in the combat, those questions that we have, why me, now what, where am I going to go? I had something, you took it away from me, came floating through my mind. When across from me was a young soldier. He was a triple amputee, lost his left arm and both legs. And every day that I was there, the aides would come to take him to therapy. And I could see him grab that little trapeze that swung over his bed, swing his torso into the wheelchair. And they'd push him out. And he made sure that he would stop at every bed in that ward. And it wasn't a big ward. And he'd stop at my bed. And he'd say, hey, how you doing today? You know, I'll tell you this. You look better today than you did yesterday when you got here. Because let's be honest, when you got here yesterday, you looked like shit. Now, we got some good docs here. We're going to take care of you. I'll see you back in the real world one of these days. And I thought, wow, if anybody could be embittered with their lot in life, would be that soldier with all the atrocities that he had taken place. And I thought, you know, I'm going to at least walk someday. And as I had made mention, I got to Tokyo. And after a couple weeks, I finally got enough courage to ask my physician whether or not I could come back and, well, play this silly game of football again. And his response was something like this. He said, don't worry about it. You're going to have a normal life. You're going to be able to do the things that normal people do. Just don't expect to get back in the gridiron. He said, because in fact, you just won't have the strength nor the flexibility to do the things that are necessary to be a running back in the NFL for you. See what he'd formulated from what? From his point of view, from his stream of information, correct or not in his diagnosis, was a perception about my ability. But as my authority figure, he just sucked that hope right out. 2 days later, unbeknownst to me, I got a postcard in the mail. Simple postcard. It's got 2 lines on it. It said this: Rock, team's not doing well. We need you. Art Rooney. Wow, somebody needed me. Well, they didn't need me. Somebody took the time to care. Being the family that they are today and they were back then, I came back and they bought me a year. Put me in injured reserve. I had another operation. Came back the following year. A little bit bigger, a little bit stronger. Made the taxi squad that year. But they bought me 2 years of an opportunity, 2 years to heal, 2 years to get something done. And so I came back in 1972, a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger. Leading ground gainer during the exhibition season. Thank you very much. Made the football team. Never carried the ball thereafter, but hey, better than the year before. Came back the following year, a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger. Leading ground gainer, again, during the exhibition season. Thank you very much. Got to carry the ball once during that season. Better than the year before, but all of a sudden, within our lives, all of a sudden, the coming year, 1974, was not looking up for me. I mean, to make the team again, I was going to have to fight with every free agent, draft choice, and rookie to do so, and I just didn't think it was fair. Not that life's fair. I just thought, hey, I did come back. I did make the team. I got a chance to play, maybe not to the level I thought, but that wasn't part of the deal in the race, Patty. So I left the team after the 73 season to find my life's work. When all of a sudden, I'm in Chicago selling life insurance. When I got a call from a teammate of mine, Andy Russell, captain of the football team, coming into Chicago, big sports dinner, unbeknownst to me, Boys and Girls Club, sponsored by the NFL. Guys are coming from all over the league. He said, why don't you join us? Hadn't seen you since the end of the season. It'd be great to get together again. Come on. Well, I'm not going back. And so I declined very politely. He pushed, I declined again, and he pushed some more. Then he asked me that one question: why? Well, the only thing I could blurt out is, I'm not coming back. I quit. I'm not coming back. And he said, you can't quit. He said, if you quit, what you have already done is that you've already made a decision for the coaching staff. You like them well enough to make decisions for them? He said, no. Your responsibility, if this is what you want to do, is you come back and you make them make a decision. You back them in the corner. You give them every reason to either keep you or release you. But God, you don't cut yourself. I mean, the reality of this game is we all be expendable. The reality of this game is you all could be cut at any time. But if this is what you want, then you don't cut yourself. And maybe it was just the arm twisting I needed from an older brother I didn't have, and I went back. And everything that I had perceived, did take place. And I had a fight with every free agent, a draft choice, and rookie once again to be able to make the team. Leading ground gainer during the exhibition season. Thank you very much. Now, I tell you that, and the reason that I was a leading ground gainer during the exhibitions, it wasn't because of the fact that it was bigger, better, faster than all the other running backs that the team had. It was a simple fact that I played more than anybody else during that period of time. I carried the ball more than anybody else during that period of time. Given those two simple statistics, I better be the leading ground gainer, because all they were providing for me was an opportunity to be able to make the team. And they had to keep me. And I was the 5th running back out of 4 at the beginning of that season. Back playing special teams once again. When unbeknownst to us, things happen. First game of that season in 1974, Franco Harris gets hurt. The backup becomes the starter. I become the backup to the backup. Wow, I've never been there before. So with renewed vigor in that first game, second game, third game, fourth game, right before the half, the backup gets hurt. And I'm inserted in the game at fullback, along with my running mate, a guy by the name of Preston Pearson, you might remember, finished his career with the Dallas Cowboys. But I tell you this only because he broke one down the sidelines, 43 yards, scored right before the half. Gives us a lead. We go in at halftime, go over assignments, adjustments. Who's going to start the second half? Maybe those guys that got you the lead in the first half, and we get to start the second half, and as a team, we win that game. Following week, everybody's still banged up, so Preston and I get to start, and as a team, we win that game. The week thereafter is a Monday night game, an extra day of healing. Franco now becomes healthy. Damn. That's okay. At least I got a chance to play, show, prove what I could do. And we had our pregame meal, much like this, in breakout groups. All the running backs get together. We go over last-minute assignments, adjustments. Coach gives us the first 3 plays of the game, just in case Bradshaw should forget, so we can remind him what they are. Looks around the table, and he said, Franco, you and Rock will start tonight. Momentarily, I was quite confused. I didn't know how we both could play the same position at the same time. When it finally dawned on me that I was going to play the fullback position as I had been playing, I was going to play the other running back position. Nobody told me that. I wish they would have been better prepared going to the game. But as a team, we win that game. So we start the remaining part of that season, Bradshaw, Franco, and myself. And we win the division, and we go to the playoffs. And we win the playoffs, and we go to the Super Bowl for the first time. And we win the Super Bowl. And ultimately, we play 6 more years together, 3 more Super Bowls, and in 1976, Franco and I become the second set of running backs in the history of the NFL, each to gain 1,000 yards rushing in one season. And after 12 years, I retired. Now, I tell you that whole story in context because of the fact that no matter how determined we may be, how passionate we are about what we do, if you look back in our lives, there have been times when, we've beaten our head against the wall. There's times we question our own ability. There's times when the grass looks greener on the other side. There are times when we want to quit, move on, change. Well, I suppose the whole moral of this little story is that if I would have quit, I never had the opportunity to play those years or play in all those Super Bowls or have all those memories. But the reason I got a chance to play wasn't because of my size and speed, 2 things I do not possess, but ultimately because of one talent. And one of the things that we, even at our age and what we do, is that we all have a talent of one nature or another. And it's our responsibility to be able to use and define what that talent is and bring it back to our family and our communities and be able to give back. For you see, prior to that breakout group all those many years ago, Chuck Noll went to our backfield coach and said, listen, you have a weakness in your backfield. Who is your best blocker? He said, Bleier. He said, then start him. One talent. And I tell you this only because of the fact that that fine line of one that connects our life, or my life specifically in this story, came full circle. For if it wasn't for that one talent, I might not have had that opportunity. Then I got to thinking, well, if it wasn't for that one injury, I might not have had a chance to play. If it wasn't for Preston's one touchdown, we may never have played the second half. Or if it wasn't for one phone call, or one postcard, or one triple amputee, or one black soldier, it may never have happened at all. And if you think about it, no matter what we may do, and the impact that we have is that we really have an impact to be able to change lives by being able to talk about our stories and being able to share what they're all about. Because that's the essence as we move forward of generations before, of not knowing but have a better idea and an understanding of what generations had gone through to be able to give them the opportunities that exist. So I want to thank all of you for giving me an opportunity to be able to stand here, but thank you for showing up and supporting what this breakfast is all about. God bless you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, obviously I talked too long.
No, not at all.
Are we going to have questions and answers?
Absolutely. What a story and what a storyteller. Rocky is kind enough to be taking questions to stay with us a little bit longer.
Rock, before this started, you and I had a mini conversation. I have one question. My father reconnected with the people who shot him down and also his crew. Did you find the gentleman that picked you up and put you on the helicopter?
No. Yeah, no, not in that case, not at all. But I at least had the opportunity to go back to Vietnam and go back to the same area where we were in conflict and got to meet a couple of Vietnamese that had been in the regiment in which we fought, and so at that time, and so that was a great experience. But I also, a part of that was an ESPN deal, is that we're shooting out in the rice paddy. We're shooting in the rice paddy, and so anyway, we walk off to the side, and one of the things I see is this little Vietnamese gentleman on a motorbike, and it's like a little gravel road, and so all of a sudden he gets off and he's watching what's taking place. And I'm sure it's like any neighborhood, basically, where all of a sudden there's a film crew, and you're wondering what's going on and what all these people are doing here in this rice paddy. So somebody says to me, why don't you go over and talk to him? Get me an interpreter. Yeah, and I will, And so I walk over to him, and so I'm waiting for an interpreter to come, and he says to me, Americal Division, Bravo Company, 196. I said, go. What? And he repeats it. Americal Division, Bravo Company, 196. Well, Bravo Company was the reason that we got into a firefight to begin with. Bravo Company was in the field. For those that had worked in Vietnam, we worked out of fire zones, and so off of hills. So we were on LZ West and LZ Siberia, and a company each, and then 2 companies in the field, and on a rotation. And Bravo Company was in the field, and we're up in Siberia. We get a call that Bravo Company is in firefight. They're danger. We get airlifted out into the valley, and we go and get them out of the hot spot eventually. And it wasn't until late that night did we finally get there. But anyway, but he was attached to Bravo Company at that time, and he was, what do we call him? Not an interpreter, he's our scout. You know, he was a scout for Bravo Company at that time, and I'm going, wow. And he lives right there in that area on a little farm that he had. And I thought, for me, that came full circle of somebody that was attached, that was there at that moment in time. So that was a great experience. I don't know how I got onto that answer, but I forgot the question.
Another question here. Go.
Rock, in the movie that they did, there seemed to be that some of your teammates wanted you to not be making the team because you were taking up a spot that a better player could take.
Right.
Can you clarify that and put some truth to that in context?
That's right. You know, so we had, anyway, so, you know, we were approached to do the movie about my life, and so it was an ABC Monday night movie at the time, and they were, you know, filming that, and I said, okay, fine. More importantly, they said Robert Urich was going to play the lead, because that's how I see myself. I don't know what you guys see. I mean, that's how I see myself: tall, good-looking, a lot of hair, you know, at the time, and I thought, that's perfect. But like all movies, you know, like all movies, part of that was the creation. Did anybody say that? No. Did anybody feel that? They might have. You know, it was one of those things where the writer goes, well, we have to have a little conflict here, or we have to at least say what maybe people are feeling, if that's the case, you know, and so that's how that came in at that moment in time.
Great question. Other questions here? I do have one. You know, Veterans Breakfast Club, we're all about storytelling. One thing about Vietnam veterans is they generally have not shared their stories very much, and that, I think, harmed them when they came home. I remember you saying that you were forced to tell your story, correct? There were reporters asking you about it.
Well, you know, and maybe my transition because of that, and just because of that, is that as I talked to the majority of Vietnam veterans coming back had to repress their feelings, I mean, because of the identity of the war and the conflict. You know, there have been stories that you've heard, not heard, I mean, people being spat upon, because we were still identified with that war. And you know, there was messages, you come back on a plane, I've heard soldiers say, you know, I think it'd be good if you change into civilian clothes before you got off this plane so you don't have any conflict. And you come back, and there wasn't arms that were opened up to you as we had in World War II, and then thereafter. So we're baby killers, we're this, American Legion, wasn't embracing Vietnam veterans to come back. And so we just had to repress those feelings. Went back to about their life as best possibly can. Back to school, got a job, got married, you know, and never had a chance to talk about those experiences. So I come back, and honest to God, I become a story, only because I'm trying to make this team again, and so they have to talk about something, and so I get to talk about my life. I get to talk about those experiences. I get to talk about, so it was somewhat of a cathartic release to be able to do that, and at least I got that out, and so it became somewhat justifiable because I made the team, and so it was a story that I told back then and continue to tell, and been told the same story for the last 53 years. Anyway, so hopefully it's got a little bit better. Anyway.
Your emotion that you have.
Hey, Dave Barker, I'm going to get you on the mic here so everybody can hear what you're going to ask.
Your emotion that you have personally, that you involved in, and I had the pleasure of meeting you 25 years ago with Big Brother. You have a heart that is, this terminology isn't correct, but not normal. I mean, you have such a give-back attitude that I honestly believe it's quite a compliment to you, but you really enforce what you were saying in life changes and so on and so forth, and you handled what you handled personally. That's got to be just a real inspiring way that the foundation in your life is so strong for you to have that kind of an attitude. And my compliment to you from one to another is just unbelievable.
Well, you know, I think basically the fact is that, I feel because of the opportunity that I had, because of being able to play with that team, because of single-handedly winning those 4 Super Bowls and not getting the recognition of doing that, but being put on and involved with that pedestal. And then, of course, being a Vietnam veteran and being wounded and coming back, is that there is a certain responsibility. I felt, that stories need to be told and or as much support. So if I'm put in a position that if I can help by being there or whatever it is, to give recognition to that era, to the soldiers, to whatever veterans need or their issues that are out there, and being a voice of some nature, then that's my responsibility. And I also think too is that for me specifically, is that like all of us, we have to work to get to where we are. And some, let's say, not to take away, but sometimes with people with God-given talent, think that it is their right because they're so talented in doing that. They don't need to be involved. They don't need to talk about it. They, are on a different pedestal. And so when we have to work for where we get to be, you want to be able to hopefully help somebody along the way if you got that opportunity to do so. So that's my feeling, basically. And the 6th grade teacher, Sister Blair, would have kicked my ass if I didn't do that. So that was the biggest threat. So,
Chuck, would you mind standing up? Chuck Paturkey, Vietnam Marine.
This might be a little personal, but I know when you were playing football, your time was absorbed with what you were doing. But did you ever have to seek mental help, like for PTSD after time?
That's a good question. No, not, and I say that, and I say no, I didn't because to some degree, the cathartic or the catharsis of talking about it, talking about it all the time, talking about it, it's a part of your life. So that was somewhat of a of an issue. That. No, no. Bless you. That's right. Bless you. No, I had to go to therapy during my first marriage, but anyway, so that was. But it had nothing to do with Vietnam, so there.
Anyway. Rocky, I don't know whether this was an original thought to you or not, but you were quoted years ago in saying that one of the ways that Vietnam veterans were different than veterans of other wars is you went over alone
and you came back alone. And that's something that resonated with me ever since.
Yeah, and it's true, and I think about it, unless for the first group that went over back in 63, 64, it might have went over as a unit, but after that it was a replacement war. And so you came in, I was the first new guy in 3 months to my unit, and so it's not as if you knew anybody, basically, you were stuck in there. The best you had was a nickname that you might remember, but you had no other relationship from coming from the same area or background or going to school and so on. So I think that they finally got that correct. We're, our troops today, are go over as a group, spend their time, come back, go back to training, for a rotation period of time before. But you stay with the people that are there, and you get to know them, and so you have a better relationship. So yeah, and that whole, we're just individuals coming in, dropped in, not a whole lot of training, because that camp that you went through, jungle training before you went out to your unit, just, that was, oh, okay, fine. So it wasn't much until you learned on the job, basically, of trying to get through.
John Barber.
Yeah, Rocky, I've met you a couple times at the Allegheny Country Club when the NFL had their tournaments up there. Just a quick story. I caddied for Miami defensive back, and he said he caught more passes from Bradshaw than from his own receivers.
That wasn't a question, John.
That was a good statement.
Rocky, you have an amazing sense of humor. And it just is spontaneous. I know it's not something that you prepared in advance. And I think this is a talent that you have that probably helps so many veterans, too, for what they have gone through. Now, did you always have that sense of humor?
Depends on who you're talking to.
Hey, we've got Irene here. This is a good chance for Irene, for me to let people know that Irene Harrell, stand up, please, is, she interviews veterans, and she's interviewed probably about 50 veterans. She's a junior at Point Park University. She can meet you in person. You can interview people over the phone, over Zoom. You're writing about veterans, and you do a lot of great work. So thank you so much, Irene, for coming and for the work you do with veterans.
Thank you, Todd. It's such an honor to be here with you all. Rocky, it's such an honor to meet you. My dad, my whole family is such a huge fan of you. I've had the privilege of interviewing many veterans. I remember one of the vets I interviewed, it was the first time he had ever told me his story. He had never even told his children or his wife. What advice do you have for veterans, especially Vietnam, since so many vets were treated so poorly when they got back home? What advice do you have for Vietnam vets who might be hesitant to share their story?
Well, I think the biggest advice is why. I mean, why the hesitancy? And it's something that might be personal in that regards. The other factor too is that we should really talk about the Vietnam era if we're going to talk about that, because there are a whole lot of soldiers that didn't get to Vietnam, and were in Korea or were in Germany or Alaska or stateside or so on, and I get this at times because they say, well, no, I wasn't in combat. Well, so it's the luck of the draw. The fact is that, but that doesn't mean you don't have a story. It doesn't mean that you don't have experiences. And the stories aren't always war stories. They're just stories that need to be shared, no matter what you may have done in that era of time. And just to be able to, discuss. Sometimes I get it's almost somewhat being apologizing that, oh, no, I wasn't in country. I don't feel that way. You know how many guys that would want to change places with you, during that period of time? It wasn't as if there was a lot of guys volunteering to go over to Vietnam, so by the luck of the draw, you get to wherever that duty station is. But the fact is that there's still stories. I mean, there's still stories, and, and how you stole from from the kitchen, and how you got extra food and working KP and whatever the duty, and trying to get one over on your sergeant, or I mean, they're all those stories. They're all there. We all experience them of one nature or another. So that is an important thing. As I tell people, I said, like the military, playing sports, for those of us who played football, okay, and I don't care whether it was from junior high to high school, even if you played in college, but the locker room is the locker room, and it doesn't change. It's the same in grade school as it is in junior high, as it is in high school, as it is in college, and is on the professional level. It doesn't get any better. They're not any brighter. I mean, it's just older. They're still pulling pranks, and they got this, and and you hear those stories about so it's kind of like the same in military. I don't care where you are. There's still those stories and those pranks and those things that you did, and how you snuck off of base, and that are just a part of life, and so those need to be shared. And so
we have one more question. Mal, you have a question?
Yes, I do. Do you ever get together with your unit? The reason why I'm asking is we have a reunion every other year, and some of these guys can't talk to their families what they went through. And some of them, like 2 years ago, one guy stood up and says, I want to apologize to my wife and kids because I still have PTSD and I didn't know it till now. And it's therapeutic to get together with those guys. What you're doing is fantastic. Being able to get people to talk. Thank you.
Not a question there, but do you get together with your
with your
Army unit?
No. No, it just. So I get, like the 196's gathering, Well, okay, but it's not really. It wasn't the 4th or the 31st. It wasn't Charlie Company, And so, yeah, they all serve, but I don't have really any identity with them or stories of being able to tell one another, so I don't do that.
Mike Pentland asked me just a moment ago, he said, I know that you went back to Vietnam with ESPN. Is he going back to Vietnam with your trip, the Veterans Breakfast Club trip in November? And I said, no, but I wonder if we could make that happen. So I'm contacting you about that. All right, this will be the last one. This will be finally the last one.
I caught a bus at the University of Pittsburgh to go down there and dedicate the Vietnam War Memorial in D.C. Anyway, I didn't want to go. I had second thoughts and all kind of emotions. But anyway, I want to know one thing. You gave me an inspiration to be marching in a parade to dedicate the Vietnam War Memorial. You were in the stands. I remember seeing you there, and they gave me hope that I could go on. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. You know, the memorial is so important. I mean, the memorial, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, because it's a reminder of those who had committed, you know, and gave the ultimate to their life. But the interesting thing, and you know, so you get involved in issues, as we all do, and so on, and you know, not to. But one of the issues is now, you know, the state of Pennsylvania is one of 9 states that does not allow independent voters to vote in their primary. And so we're trying to get that changed. And the reason is that Pennsylvania has 800,000 veterans in this state, and 400,000 of them are registered as independent voters. So they don't have a right in primaries to cast a vote, and that's not right. And so we're trying to change that in the state now. The interesting thing is that on the wall, and here is that on the wall of those 58,000 plus names that have given their life, 60% of those names are under 21 years. And if you think about it, the point of when we went was that the voting age was 21. And the majority of those didn't have the right to vote at that time, but yet they served their country. So it's just a shame that that has not changed, and to be able to have that right to be able to vote. And so just my little
thank you.
Thank you,
Dr. Bleier. Thank you, UPMC, for making this event possible.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is the end of our program. You know we love to end with song, and we will do so again. Mick Maloney is with us. He is going to lead us in the Armed Forces Medley. Mick, where are you? There, you're right here. Hey, and I do want to let people know it. Eric Lundblom with the VA Vet Center is here with us. Please, Eric, stay for a little while if people want to talk to you. We have Chris Brown, who is heading up the Pittsburgh Veterans Day Parade. Chris, thank you so much. Hang around here. We have Mike Marsula, who's working with veterans to improve housing right here. And who else do we have? Somebody else we had here. Oh, Joe Bodner. How do I forget an old Cold War Army veteran who is here for working with PA Career Links, helps veterans connect to jobs. Mick Maloney, thank you for leading us.
You're welcome. You're welcome. This is, I want to honor all the veterans here with my talent, which is singing. And I'd like to sing for you the Armed Forces Medley. And as I sing your anthem, if you can raise your hand or stand up, or everybody stand up now anyway, so we can honor your service. This is Armed Forces Medley that I learned as a barbershop singer. Just wanted to get that plug in there. From the rising of the sun till the battle's fought and won, we will fight for the right to defend our country. We're always ready for the call. We place our trust in thee. Through surf and storm and howling gale, high shall our purpose be. Semper Paratus is our guide, our pledge, our motto too. We're always ready, do or die. Aye, Coast Guard, we fight for you. From the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, we will fight our country's battles on the land, air, and on the sea. First to fight for right and freedom, and to keep our honor clean. We are proud to claim the title of the United States Marines. Anchors aweigh, my boys, anchors aweigh. Farewell to college joys, we sail at break of day. To our last night on shore, drink to the foam. Until we meet once more, here's wishing you a happy voyage home. First to fight for the right and to build a nation's might, and the army goes rolling along. Proud of all you have done, fighting till the battle's won, and the army goes rolling along. Then it's hi, hi, hey, the army's on its way. Count off your cadence loud and strong, for where'er we go, you will always know that the army goes rolling along. Off we go into the wild blue yonder, climbing high into the sun. Here they come, zooming to meet our thunder. Atta boys, give her the gun. Down we dive, shouting our plane from under. Off with one hell of a roar. We live in fame or get down in flames, boys. Nothing can stop the U.S. Air Force. And these are the great armed forces of America. They serve America at home or overseas. They serve America. Thank you.
Thank you, Mick. Thank you all. Take care.